So as we get ready to enter October, if you can believe it, we are nearing halfway through this semester. It's hard to believe. Want to just give you a brief overview of the week's learning expectations and give you a little heads up about what's coming in our on-campus session. So let's go ahead and go to our modules. So we are finishing up. We're done with week 4, and we're done with week 5. The grading for the WHO RCA, I know Dr. Duva and we had hoped to get that done this week. We're a little bit behind, but we'll be giving some feedback on that over this weekend, so you should see your grade on that. And then week 6, there was no group work other than your individual assignment, and I know I posted earlier this week an overview of what those expectations are. So you'll see that's due October 1st, and that's 30 points of the 100 points assigned to the entire assignment that's associated with the clinical microsystem project. You will note that as part of this, you did have a quiz, and that quiz closed on the 28th, and so some of you did have questions about the quiz. If you go back to the quiz, now that the quiz is closed, you can go in and see the explanation for the answers, and hopefully those explanations will make sense. And now that it's closed, I can respond to you if the explanations do not make sense. I know some of you emailed me earlier than that, but it's preferred not to respond to individual questions until everybody's taken the quiz. So with that in mind, we are getting ready to enter week 7, and this module has been opened for a while. I just wanted to go ahead and talk through what the expectation is for this week in anticipation of any of your questions. So we're moving from patient safety now into thinking about it in terms of continuous improvement and quality improvement, and beginning with some sort of thinking about some of the ways we conceptualize quality improvement using different theoretical frameworks. So your IHI modules and some of your readings talk about the theory of knowledge. Where did all of this thinking, who are the thought leaders in quality improvement, and what is improvement science, and what is complexity science? I know those of you who have had Dr. Wright and Dr. Kramer's course were introduced to complexity and did some work in that area as well, and have done some reading. So this should be familiar content to you. So it's understanding all of those nuances related to the types of problems, the type of context, the practice arenas where we are, and how all of those then guide how we identify problems, how we characterize problems, and then how we come up with ideas for improving in improving areas where there are problems. So the learning objectives are that you will reflect on strengths and gaps in your own knowledge related to the foundations of improvement science. There's a theoretical framework that talks about the realms and the big buckets that you need to have to be able to lead improvement work. And so it's just for you to understand those dimensions and put it in perspective of your DNP, your whole scholarly endeavor in the doctoral program. It's not just related to this course. And to be able to apply the theoretical framework in assessing clinical problems and in the clinical microsystem. And so that's what the intent is that you will take away from this, these next few modules. You're actually going to be applying this in a real world setting. Some of that will be through your discussions, and some of that will be through your own project. And part of that will be being able to explain the characteristics of complexity, complex adaptive system, as it relates to your own clinical practice area, and what are those implications for system design. And some of those implications for understanding local context can be derived from some of our implementation frameworks. And I'm just introducing you to one this week. The consolidated framework pulls from a variety of different frameworks, but it provides a nice overview. And it's not meant to be a checklist, and it's not meant to be a list of all these dimensions and domains that need to be addressed when you look at improvement work, but to give you some examples. And so we'll be focusing on specific components of that theoretical framework, again, applying it to your own practice area. So if you look at the readings here, I did double check, and I will check again to make sure the links work. You'll notice some of these are quite old, but they are really foundational and provide the core, the beginning thoughts around this. And so you have a reading here which is on complex adaptive systems that was first published in Crossing the Quality Chasm, which is a foundational text for us, those of us who are in the field of quality improvement. And then you have another example here of applying a complex adaptive system to the practice of nursing, which again, seeing an example of how something is applied to something that you already understand is hopefully helpful. And you'll notice here the readings aren't overly long, they're quite short actually. This article gives you some propositions about what is the science of improvement and exploring what those foundations of improvement are. And I think that provides a nice overview of understanding some of those theoretical foundations related to improvement and implementation work. You'll see here's the reference for the entire consolidated framework, and I've also included the link to the supplemental file. This is an online journal, and they include many supplemental files at the end of the articles. So if you pull up the article, if you go to, I think it's to the end, you'll see all of the different supplemental files that are associated with it. And I find this one in particular helpful, especially for this assignment. And then again, you have some background readings that may help you. I'm drawing to your attention this whiteboard activity, Deming's video on profound knowledge, which I believe is in your IHI module, but if not, it's something that's helpful to review because it also puts a lot of this into context. You will see there is a VoiceThread presentation this week, and I don't think it's going to work for me in this view, but there is a VoiceThread presentation that is associated with this that is posted, and I'll make sure that that's active. And then your assignment this week is to begin, there are some one IHI module that is due to be uploaded, and that should be the end of the module. Oh no, there's a discussion. If I can move this over a little bit. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. So this week there is a group discussion, and it's about applying the concepts of these theoretical frameworks and complex adaptive systems to your own clinical practice area. So you'll see here the initial post is due Thursday, as usual, when we try to do that, October 5th, with responses to your peers by Sunday. So it's where you demonstrate through this discussion that you understand these concepts. So that requires that you do the readings and that you listen to the slides in advance. And as you do the readings, start thinking about these prompts so you have some ideas and thoughts about how you're going to apply this. And also you can make notation of where you might cite your references and how you demonstrate how you've applied these concepts within your discussion. So the first question asks you to describe a clinical issue in your clinical practice area related to your idea for improving clinical practice. Ideally, it's your DMP project focus, but it doesn't have to be. So to describe that clinical issue, and in particular, describe the complexity and nature of the problem within the zone of complexity. So think about it as, I know some of you have heard about a wicked problem. How complex is it, and what is it within the clinical context that makes it part of a complex adaptive system? And then think about in this practice setting, all right, so here you're thinking about what improvement suggestions you might have, what solutions you might have. Very often includes education or clinical practice guidelines. So in this practice setting, in what kind of situations, it may not be the situation you gave an example, but are there situations in your complex environment where clinical practice guidelines are appropriate? And again, that's based on the principles that you'll learn about in your readings, right? And when would it be more appropriate to use expert judgment? And how does the use of these type of implementation or decision trends, and use of these types of decision aids apply to the complexity of the issue? What if there's not much certainty on cause and effect? If there's some haziness about cause and effect with your issue in your practice area, how are those decisions made? And then lastly, to describe the characteristics of your system, your clinical microsystem. And focus in particular, if you look at the C4 model, on the inner and outer setting characteristics. There's a whole list of different types of characteristics, and these have been identified in the improvement literature and research as characteristics that are associated with successful or not effective implementation of change. So look at some of those characteristics. This is all the beginning of a gap analysis for your DMP scholarly project, as well as the beginning of analysis of the type of problem that you're addressing. You all have an idea and you're working on clarifying your problem statement, and so this is just another tool or another a way to think about it and another way to frame it. And it's really important as you start defining a problem that you're defining that problem within the context that you're talking about. And so that's why it's important. And that's why it's great to come in with an idea of a clinical practice issue, but until you partner that with an actual clinical context, it may not be as, I guess, applicable to all settings. So it's really important that you do a gap analysis and you understand the local context and the problem within that context. And that's the purpose for having you do this discussion, and that you will compare and contrast. The intent is that you help each other, that you might bring up questions that you might see gaps in your peers' posting, or perhaps even inconsistencies or maybe some misinterpretation of the concepts as applied to their example, so that you're helping each other learn and give each other feedback. So again, I'm always available for questions, and I'll be watching the discussion board. That being said, have a great weekend, and I'm really getting eager to see you all in a couple of weeks.